Hey everyone, and welcome back to AWoke Christianity. You know, we like to dig deep into writings that help us better understand the Christian message in our world today.
And sometimes that takes us to some unexpected places.
It sure does. Today's deep dive is all about the parable of the prodigal son,
But with a twist. We're exploring a piece by John S. Suarez.
who, for anyone who doesn't know,
Is this really interesting guy. He calls himself a student of life.
which I love, it's so humble.
Right, like he's always learning and growing.
Exactly. And he shares these like little breadcrumbs he picks up on his journey as a
Yeah.
Jesus follower.
On his blog.
Yeah.
And he's got some really powerful insights.
Especially on this prodigal son story. It's not then like he's retelling it.
Oh, no, it's way deeper than that.
It's like he's using this ancient parable as a lens to like examine some really huge questions.
About self-compassion.
Second chances.
And what it even means to love without limits.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever read a biblical story and it just like reached right into your heart?
Oh, all the time. That's what I love about the Bible, you know?
It's like those stories are speaking directly to us, even thousands of years later.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what Suarez taps into right from the start of his piece.
He talks about the story reaching right into your heart.
Mm.
And I was like, yes, that's it.
He gets it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Like there's this universal longing to be accepted, even when we feel like we've messed up.
Absolutely. Like even when we feel like we're the prodigal son who squandered everything.
Right. And Suarez even quotes that part where the father is so overjoyed.
When the son comes home, oh, that gets me every time.
Me too. He puts a ring on his previously lost son's finger and has a fattened calf prepared.
A feast in his honor. Like, can you imagine?
It makes you wonder what that fattened calf was even for.
Right. Like some special occasion the father had been looking forward to.
And the prodigal son was more important than even that.
Exactly. I mean, that's powerful stuff.
So powerful. And it makes you think about God's love, right?
Absolutely. It's like nothing is more important to God than our return to him.
Our coming home, as Suarez puts it,
Yes. Coming home to that unconditional love.
which is so hard to grasp sometimes.
Oh, tell me about it. Suarez even talks about his own struggle with feeling unworthy of forgiveness.
Even though he understands God's love intellectually.
Right. It's one thing to know it in your head
But it's another thing to really feel it in your heart.
and to believe that it applies to you, even with all your mess-ups.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Suarez's piece so relatable.
He's so honest about that tension. He talks about seeing this darkness in himself, you know?
Like the mistakes he's made and how that makes it hard to believe he could be loved unconditionally.
It's like he's wrestling with this idea that God forgives, yeah, but maybe he's still not good enough.
Which is so real. I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if they've been exposed to what Suarez calls toxic theology.
Ooh, yeah. That idea that we have to earn God's love, that it's conditional on our behavior.
What's like a constant measuring up and falling short.
And it can be so damaging. It's like it creates this barrier between us and God.
And between us and ourselves.
So true. And it's so interesting how Suarez ties that concept back to this parable of the prodigal son.
Right. Like he's not just leaving us with an emotional response to the story,
He's challenging us to actually do something with it.
to apply it to our lives.
And the first application he dives into is self-compassion.
Which, let's be honest, is so much easier said than done.
I know, right? But what I appreciate about Suarez is that he doesn't sugarcoat it.
He admits that he still struggles to forgive himself, even though he understands God's forgiveness.
It's like, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Exactly. It makes him so human, so relatable,
And it makes his insights even more valuable.
because he's speaking from a place of experience,
And vulnerability.
which is so powerful. And I think that's where his idea of applications comes in, you know? Like he doesn't just leave us with this like, oh, wow, that's a nice story.
Right. He actually gives us these concrete ways to like put these principles into practice.
Exactly. It's like, okay, so how does this parable about the prodigal son actually change the way I live my life?
I love that.
It's so practical.
And the first application he talks about is self-compassion.
Which is huge, especially when we're talking about forgiveness, right?
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
how can we possibly offer forgiveness to others if we can't even forgive ourselves?
It's like that whole remove the log from your own eye before you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye thing.
Exactly. And Suarez is so good at connecting those dots, you know?
Like,
Like he brings it back to the father in the parable.
right. The father doesn't hesitate, doesn't lay down any conditions for forgiveness.
It's just immediate and complete.
Boom. You're home, you're loved, end of story.
And Suarez seems to be saying that maybe we need to offer that same kind of grace to
Which
ourselves.
is so hard though, right? I mean, especially when we've messed up in a big way.
It's way easier to extend compassion to others than it is to ourselves. So true. But do you think Suarez offers any practical advice on how we can actually cultivate more self-compassion? Like, what does that even look like?
He talks about the importance of recognizing our inherent worthiness, regardless of our mistakes.
Okay, I like that.
It's like that quote from Henri Nguyen, the return of the prodigal son is the return of the heart.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
Right. It's about coming home to ourselves, to that place of unconditional love and acceptance.
And I think that's where the second application comes in, embracing the lost.
This part really hit me hard because Suarez compares holding on to hurt to an addiction.
Whoa. Is that an overstatement? I mean, is all resentment necessarily harmful?
It's a good question. I think what Suarez is getting at is that holding on to anger and resentment can keep us trapped in the past.
It's like we're constantly reliving those hurts, those betrayals.
Exactly. And it prevents us from moving forward, from offering forgiveness and extending grace to others, even when it's difficult.
He's not saying we should condone hurtful behavior, right?
No, not at all. But he's saying that we need to find a way to release the grip that anger has on us.
Because ultimately it's hurting us more than it's hurting the person who wronged us.
Exactly. It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
So true.
Yeah.
And I think connecting this back to the idea of self-compassion is so important.
Absolutely. If we can learn to forgive ourselves for our own mistakes, it becomes a little easier to offer that same grace to others.
It's like we're practicing that radical, immediate welcome that the Father shows in the parable.
Right. There's no interrogation. No, I told you so.
It's just pure, unadulterated joy at the Son's return.
And that's the kind of welcome we need to offer to ourselves and to others.
But Suarez is very open about his own struggles with this,
Oh, yeah. He admits that letting go of past hurts is something he's still working on.
which makes him so relatable, right? I mean, we've all been there.
Absolutely. We've all been hurt by someone, and it's so hard to just let it go.
But I think that's what makes Suarez's message so powerful. It's like he's saying, hey, I'm right there with you, struggling alongside you.
And that gives me hope. Like it's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
So we've talked about self-compassion and embracing the lost,
Where does Suarez go from there?
right? Like, what's the next step in this journey of applying the prodigal son to our lives?
Well, the third application is the one he wrestles with the most, and it's love without limits.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is. And he's very upfront about how challenging this is. He even asks, is it even possible for us to love unconditionally?
Which is a question we all ask ourselves at some point, right?
Like we throw around the term unconditional love a lot.
But what does it actually look like in practice?
Right. Especially when we're talking about loving those who have hurt us, who have betrayed us.
Suarez points back to the father in the parable as this, like, radical example of unconditional love.
Like the father's love isn't based on the son's worthiness or behavior.
It's just there, waiting to be received.
And that's the divine kind of love, right?
Yeah. But as humans, we're inherently flawed. We have limitations. Do you think Suarez believes we can actually achieve that level of unconditional love?
That's the million-dollar question. And he doesn't offer any easy answer.
Which is refreshing, honestly. It's like he's not trying to sell us some kind of formula for perfect love.
Right. But he does seem to suggest that maybe experiencing God's love, that unconditional acceptance, can empower us to love others in a similar way.
It's like we're receiving that love, and then hopefully we can learn to give it away.
But he's also realistic about the struggle.
Oh, yeah, he talks about how he knows he's going to mess up.
He's going to fall short.
It's like he's acknowledging that this kind of love is a constant journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And that's a really important point for us to remember.
Loving without limits doesn't mean we'll always get it right or that it won't be hard.
But the parable reminds us that it's a goal worth striving for.
It's like learning to walk, you know. We're going to stumble and fall.
But we keep getting back up and trying again.
And maybe that's the whole point. It's about embracing the messiness of being human.
With all its flaws and contradictions.
And recognizing that even in our brokenness, we're still capable of extraordinary love.
And I love how he ties it all together at the end, like after all this wrestling with self-compassion and forgiving others.
He ends with this really powerful statement about God's love.
Yeah, he talks about how we don't need to say anything or perform any rituals to be welcomed back by God.
Like there's nothing we have to do to earn it,
Exactly. It's just there waiting for us.
which is such a comforting thought, especially for people who've been hurt by religious institutions or felt judged by organized religion.
It's like he's saying that God's love isn't contingent on our performance or our ability to articulate the right beliefs.
It's simply there, waiting for us to receive it.
And I think that ties back to the whole idea of self-compassion, too.
Right, we don't have to earn God's love, and we don't have to earn our own love either.
It's about recognizing our inherent worthiness, regardless of our mistakes or perceived shortcomings.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into John S. Suarez's reflections on the prodigal son, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners who are wrestling with these same questions about forgiveness, self-acceptance, and loving others?
I think Suarez offers a really powerful message of hope. He reminds us that even when we struggle to forgive, God doesn't.
There's this radical acceptance waiting for us no matter how far we've strayed or how badly we've messed up.
It's like that beautiful image Suarez uses of simply coming home to our loving parent.
It makes me wonder, what would happen if we could approach God, or even ourselves, with that same unwavering expectation of love that the prodigal son received?
It's a challenging idea, for sure, but I think that's the beauty of this parable and Suarez's reflection on it. He doesn't give us easy answers or tell us how to feel.
Right, it's not like a step-by-step guide to unconditional love.
Exactly. He invites us to wrestle with these complex ideas, to sit with the discomfort, and to ultimately discover our own unique paths to compassion and forgiveness.
It's not about achieving some perfect state of unconditional love overnight, is it?
Definitely not. It's about taking small steps each day, continually striving, continually opening our hearts, even when it feels scary or impossible.
And maybe that's the whole point, embracing the messiness of being human.
With all its flaws and contradictions.
And recognizing that even in our brokenness, we're still capable of extraordinary love.
It's like those breadcrumbs Suarez talks about, We keep scattering them, keep offering those little acts of kindness and forgiveness, both to ourselves and to others.
And maybe, just maybe, those breadcrumbs will lead us all back home.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, we'd love to hear what resonated with you from this deep dive into John S. Suarez's reflections on the prodigal son. Was it the concept of self-compassion, the challenge of embracing the lost, or the idea of striving for love without limits?
We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on which of these themes speaks to your heart, and maybe even consider what one small step you can take today, one breadcrumb you can scatter, to bring a little more of that prodigal son love into your own life and the world around you. Thanks for joining us on AWoke Christianity. See you next time.